and welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions. I'm June Lindberg. I'm here with Brian Courtney
Hello.
and Chaz Jenkins.
Tiptoe through the tulips with me.
No.
Points gun at you.
I will not tiptoe. I will not tiptoe through the tulips with you, good sir, or either of you.
You make me uncomfortable.
It's making me deeply uncomfortable. Today's episode is a regular episode where we get to talk about whatever the hell we want to. And we're going to kick things off with Brian's pick.
I picked the 1986 compilation, self-titled compilation, I guess you could say, by the Misfits. Misfits are a legendary punk rock band, the pioneers and pretty much the kings of the horror punk scene, which is
literally
to me seems really obscure outside of Misfits, right?
Well,
is that correct?
It's literally the whole genre is just, it's not really it has musically, it's like has elements of like rockabilly and the 50s 60s rock and roll, like the classic stuff, but the main thing about the genre that defines it, because it's also known as horror rock, is literally if the songs are about B horror films. And there's tons of that on this compilation. Like that's the whole
There's
thing
also
about
the Misfits aesthetic, right? Like Von Frankenstein, right? One of the foundational members of the group, along with Glenn Danzig, who would famously had the single long braid of hair over his face and the skull paint. Not to mention their logo is this ghoul face. I mean, synonymous
just
with the band,
almost on par with like famous logos and aesthetics like Kiss. I mean, the Misfits aesthetic is just as good as like the Kiss. I mean, it's just as well known. When I think of Misfits, that's one of those bands that everybody wears stuff of, but probably nobody's heard the music of, like Pink Floyd. Like you could see anybody wearing a Misfits shirt and they probably have never heard a single song.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they have just surpassed the music at this point. They're just such a legendary, everybody knows the Misfits.
It's because their presentation is so iconic,
It really is.
Badass. Plus, Von Frankenstein is fucking roided up. I don't know if he's even roided, but he's jacked, And so, don't kick my ass, Von Frankenstein. It's like he's fucking jacked, So he looks sick. Like his get up is cool. I think he's the only one on stage who is that gimmicked up. Like Danzig himself, I don't think it's all painted up and everything like that. But the thing that stands out about Danzig is his voice, right? And it's insanely good on pretty much every song here. And what's crazy is the original incarnation of the group was already done by the time this compilation came out. They'd already released like Walk Among Us, Earth AD, like their classic 20-minute EPs and albums, typical of like the hardcore punk scene, like something akin to Black Flag, right? With the really short, fiery releases, straight to the point, punchy. Misfits not as aggressive as Black Flag, but in that vein. Because there's some hardcore punk elements going on too. Yeah, the band was like defunct by the time this compilation came out. Now they've gone on since to play live shows and everything, but this is just their material was so good that they just compiled the best stuff, if not everything, from the Earth AD, the Walk Among Us, the early EPs, and put it onto this compilation. So a compilation is kind of a strange pick in the context of our show. But this is a better introduction to Misfits than just getting 20 minutes. Like this is 40 minutes of fiery, catchy punk ragers, horror punk themed, kind of B more, like you said, Chaz, the B movie horror aesthetics are here, like London Dungeon.
Oh, such a good
Skull.
song. Yeah.
It's just a better introduction than just getting like 20 minutes and having to go through. We just listened to both those albums, basically, so that's why I picked it. And I picked it also because I remember Skull was like one of my favorite fucking punk songs in high school. And it still is, still amazing. So yeah, none of us had really delved into their stuff despite them being a classic band. So, just start with the most material, right? Most bang for your buck.
Right. I know June's heard the first two albums, right, June? You've rated them?
I have heard Walk Among Us and Static Age.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed the Misfits before. I always felt like they were, while I love the aesthetic and the songs are melodic and entertaining and really just, there's not a lot of bad things you can say about the way these songs are on their own. I felt like both of the albums that I listened to were just a little bit samey at the end of the day. And that was kind of my worry with this because it's 40 minutes long. It's the albums that I listened to and thought were kind of samey were much shorter. And I thought maybe my issue would compound when I got to listening to a compilation that was longer. It was maybe not as set to flow from start to finish the way that an album is.
However, the flow is pretty great on this thing for a compilation.
It's not bad. And yeah, as I'm gonna, my point is, I was surprised that I didn't find my opinion repeating itself the way that it used to. I could probably go back to Walk Among Us and Static Age and enjoy them more for having listened to this. Maybe it's because I've gone from listening on so-so headphones to decent to good speakers. But hell yeah, like, I still think it's a little samey, but at the end of the day, every song is so good that I end up not really caring. It's still a weakness, but it's not such a detriment to the album that it ruins or takes away all that much from it.
So, to give my thoughts on the Misfits first. Growing up in high school, my friend Leighton Kelly, huge punk geek, always tried to get me into them. And while same with you, June, I really liked the aesthetic. I mean, the string hair is just so iconic. I mean, that's such a boss move, is that hairstyle. And the skull logo, I mean, you can't go wrong. But I've never, ever listened to any of the music. This is my first Misfits dive. And I mean, it does its job great. It's what a compilation is supposed to do. A greatest hits is supposed to do. Just show you the best that the band has to offer. And I mean, yeah, all these songs kick ass. I like some more than others, obviously. But to name some of my favorite tunes: Hollywood Babylon, Horror Business, Teenagers from Mars, Skulls is awesome. London Dungeon is so fucking killer.
That hook is fucking great, isn't it, man? What a grower.
That riff is sick as hell. Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight is amazing. Die, Die, My Darling is far and away my favorite song. I love that tune.
That might be my favorite too. The hook on that is so good. The fucking tune is so killer.
Like, it's a guitar, it's like just punking the string a little bit, where it's like beep, 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 beep during the whole song. It adds so much. It's such a small thing, but it really elevates the tune. It's such a killer track. I think it ends kind of weakly. Last string of songs
that too.
are just kind of meh. Like, I feel like we could have ended with some of the more ragey, more just killer songs in the middle half. Because Wolf's Blood is great. I mean, these are the best of the Misfits. I mean, so it's hard to. It was really hard for me to review this without looking at it as a greatest hits. Because it's like, well, all these songs are great because it's a greatest hits album. But I think you could have rearranged these because I think it flows great. But to end with Wolf's Blood is kind of an eyebrow raiser, and I'm not even like that musically knowledgeable of the band's stuff. And even I can say, we could have ended with a better tune. I mean, hell, Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight would have been a killer closer. I mean, it's just that's such a killer song with so much energy, and I love the way that song ends. It would make for a better closer. But the album's decades old at this point, so it doesn't really matter. And more compilations have come out since then, so, it is what it is. Another song I wanted to mention that I really enjoy is Horror Business. Easily one of the catchiest songs. I mean, I love the lyrics, love the production, but I mean, that goes without saying. It's the best the band has to offer. I love how the guitars sound so dirtily crunchy, and it's like crazy to me that this is so early 80s and like even late 70s, because this sounds like it could be made today. Like, some random garage band could have the same guitars sounding like this. It just sounds so
the fidelity like ranges, right? Like there are some songs that are super clear, and then others that are much lower fidelity or like are more muffled, right? You know what I'm talking about? I don't have specific examples. I forgot to put it down, but like Ghouls Night Out is a song that sounds super produced, right? Mm-hmm. But then there are also cuts that land on here that are more muffled, don't really sound produced, just sound maybe recorded in not a studio setting, right? Because some of it, because it's different, and there's also some different takes on here from the original song. So not all of this sounds like the stuff that was laid to tape. 5 or 6 years previous. You know, it's not Von Frankenstein on every song. Sometimes it's someone else they picked up because the band kind of rotated their lineup before ultimately breaking up.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot more to it than just this group played songs. They had different people coming in and out because the group was so volatile.
Well, I should mention the discussion we had with Tom Hummer in a previous episode in season 2, where he made a great point in the Wat Tyler discussion about the idea of a compilation or a greatest hits album, where, you know, our brain kind of already knows going in that we're probably going to hear different eras of the band put together, so we can kind of have a suspension of disbelief through that. But it's great that you mentioned the production, because how some songs sound differently.
In the case of the Misfits, it's not a big deal. It's not like these songs are like lacking context necessarily, to my knowledge. Like, you know what I mean? They're just killer punk ragers with great vocal performances and amazing hooks that are just different enough to stand on their own as a run of tracks that flows really great, all kick ass. It's a little samey, but it's a strength and more than it is a weakness. It's crazy to me how different the hooks are. Like, you know what I mean, on each song, because they're so catchy, but so different, despite being a punk album, right?
I saw someone say that if Danzig started a band like 10 years earlier, he would have been in a great power pop band, because he just has a knack for hooks and a really great voice. If he started 10 years earlier, he would be right along, and I saw the comparison made to Alex Chilton of Big Star. Like, there's definitely some Big Star isms going on in the Misfits music, which is an interesting point to make, because you wouldn't consider hardcore act to take that much influence from bands that have a folkier and a janglier side to them. There's definitely some Big Star music that you could consider jangle pop before that was really a thing. But there is a wide breadth of influence in his songwriting, and those kinds of artists are included in that. And it leaves a songwriting style that is very vibrant, is very colorful, is very moving. Not necessarily emotionally, but just like it just goes so many places. And like you said, the structures of these songs, while are very similar throughout, it's hard to mistake one from another once you've heard it like a good 3 times.
Yeah,
because the melodies are just so damn good. Like I fucking love I ain't no goddamn son of a bitch.
Yeah. I don't know to think about it, baby.
His number one influence vocally being Elvis makes a lot of sense, because
they had that rockabilly.
You can hear it. You can immediately hear it.
He understands, like, you know, he kind of has that star power about him. He does stand out a great deal. He's one of my favorite things about the band, really. I mean, like, his voice is so great. He has a presence, and he can write great hooks, like we've been saying. So for him, Glenn Danzig is actually a huge part of the Misfits formula, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting.
I think pretty much everyone would agree, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to know a sort of irony. You know, we've talked about punk, you know, several times throughout the show, and we even talked about a little history of it in our Bad Religion discussion, you know, why punk was formed in the first place. I think it's cool that one of the most well-known bands in the entire genre did things that probably would be considered, like, you know, not punk, having the really, you know, catchy hooks. There's a few solos sometimes in some of the songs. The lyrical content, it isn't really political. It's more, you know, B horror movies. It honestly reminds me kind of like Wu-Tang, just such a powerhouse name, you know, sampling ninja movies and kung fu stuff. I just, it's that kind of stuff. Where it's like
so stand out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, the message I want to get across, kids, is that just be yourself and you will succeed. You know,
it's further proof that punk rock is such a massive, massive label that so much music falls under that can sound completely different. Yeah, this album has limited amount of chords that are being played, and it's being played roughshod, and the guitars are gritty, and the So the fidelity isn't like super hi-fi, on purpose. It's not super hi-fi. That's the entire aesthetic. But beyond that, you aren't really gonna take a Misfits record and directly compare it to
like a Black Flag
a
or
Black Flag
yeah.
record. Right, yeah. There's just too much variety. You won't
And I mean,
compare it to a Wipers record.
look at their
Or you won't go further back and compare it to 70s punk rock because there's obviously a little bit more going on this record. Right. Obviously, some of the stuff written in the 70s, I'm talking mid 70s.
Yeah.
Ramones, Sex Pistols, stuff like that.
Well, and look at their imagery. I mean, goodness gracious. They just clearly have their own thing that works, because if you were to go to like a venue that the Black Flags would play at, a bunch of people with their shirts off and they're all angry and mad at the world.
You're gonna get mad at a Misfits record. Never you looked at pictures of Von Frankenstein?
No, yeah, but then you see this band come out with this crazy hairstyle and leather and stuff, and everybody were like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. The aesthetic is unique.
But it stayed the test of time. I mean, like I said, people are wearing that merch. People have that logo. You can't mistake it for anything else. I mean, I think that's all there is to say. I mean, it is a compilation album. There's only so much we can say. It's harder to take some of these songs in context without hearing the album they come from. My thoughts on it are, for a compilation, it does its job damn good. I think I'm going to give this a light 8. It does exactly what it's supposed to. It gets me interested in the band. I would love to do any album from this band because I've been meaning to listen to them forever now.
See,
I think it's fantastic.
Like, I think it's awesome on its own. I think this compilation is a better intro to Misfits than any album of theirs could ever be. And not just in the sense that it's like a taste tester. I mean, this is basically the best Misfits album. It's all the great shit in one place. You know what I mean?
But that's so tourist core, though. That's such a tourist core mindset.
No, because you can go back and listen to the other albums, but you'll get the same songs. You know what I mean? I don't think it's tourist core because like you can check out other compilations or like go to their other, like you can still go around. I just don't.
I have a very.
I get what you're saying and saying that it's a taste tester, right? Like you're interested because of it. To me, on its own, it's just a fucking great punk record. I know it's a compilation, but in the Misfits canon, I mean, this stuff is pretty much like part of as the canon to the lore. You know what I mean? Whereas like a Queen's greatest hits isn't a fair way to look at it. Whereas as a compilation from the Misfits, sure, because it's all
just a much smaller discography.
Right. So their compilations are some of their most, I mean, this was the best way. Think about when this was coming out, you'd need to get a CD. Do you want a 20-minute CD or do you want 40 minutes? And that's why this one kind of stands that test of time,
Not to get sidetracked, but I'm very hit or miss when it comes to greatest hits or compilations. I think they're a little, I don't want to say exploitive, but like.
I would ask you to consider the context of this one as Glenn Danzig released this one, right? And after the band is defunct.
So like a record label didn't do this?
There's no digital music at that point. Like you can't download it, carry it around. You got to sell your CDs. So off your name value, right, you put all your great shit in one place. And that's why it's kind of considered canon because, for how awesome they are, you know what I mean? Their legacy grew bigger and bigger as time went on.
If you were to compare this to like a Guns N' Roses greatest hits, I mean, that's such a corporate, label heavy, like greatest hits of Guns N' Roses.
Queen, right?
Yeah, Queen.
Where there are 5 Queen albums and the Best of Queen compilation is the best place, but it's not an authentic look at like what they were like album for album, tit for tat. This is from the previous 2 albums. It's almost every song. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm rating it a little higher because it's a damn good compilation. I mean, I can see why it is considered canon and considered one of the best compilation albums out there. That's a good point to make. I'm
not saying you're wrong. I'm just presenting a different point of view, right? Because I'm not weighting this thing as like a compilation or anything. Whereas
it was hard for me not to. Group. I couldn't help but do that.
So I'm gonna go with a probably like a strong 8. I think it's awesome. It's an awesome punk record.
Wow.
I'm probably gonna go with like a light to decent 8 on this one. Like we've said, it isn't really a full through listen, but all the songs on it are pretty fantastic, and you can't deny that. Just there's something very compelling and just fun about their entire aesthetic that you can't ignore.
Big hit.
Grande Mountain
Hill.
Grande, Grande Hill.
In Spanish, I believe it's pronounced Hill.
How do you say
Chile?
How do you hold on 2 seconds? Give
Hill
me
in Spanish.
indulge me. How do you say hill in Spanish?
It's not even a funny joke.
It's cero.
It's very funny. Hold on.
Cero. So you say grande cero.
Grande Cero.
Oh, a big hill is actually
Grande cero.
the big hill is Gran Colina.
Gran Colina.
Gran Colina.
Management.
Gran Colina. All right.
Management.
Manajamente.
No, wow, gee. It's actually administration. Gran Colina administration. All right, that's how you have to introduce it, June.
Has found that very humorous.
Yeah, he laughed. He thought it was funny.
So, we listened to NOD last season, and Memphis Rap caught almost all of us up in its fantastic, otherworldly production style. And we had the wonderful opportunity to interview Tom Ski Mask of NOD, who gave us some pretty fantastic insight of someone who was there in Memphis doing it in the 90s. So I decided, let's do some more Memphis rap. And I chose a record that I really have been enjoying for the past several months now. The more that I listen to it, the better it gets. And I think it's one of the examples of extremely creative production in the genre. And that would be Big Hill Management. Big Hill is not exactly the most well-known Memphis artist, even less well-known than NOD was. And we'd already mentioned before that if you really wanted to get into the most well-known artists from a scene, it's going to be Koopsta, it's going to be Kingpin Skinny Pimp, it's going to be 3-6 Mafia. But there's more to the scene than that, as Tom Ski Mask said. So NOD was one that it's kind of middle range popularity for Memphis rap. Big Hill is the kind of album that not many people know about it, but the people who do really like it. And that's kind of evidenced by the Rate Your Music scores. If you look at the track scores on Rate Your Music, they're all ridiculously high, but it doesn't have a lot of ratings. And that's kind of usually indicative of a cult classic. For me, I think it deserves it wholeheartedly. It's really one of the most alluring sonically Memphis rap albums I've ever heard. And especially since it's only 25 minutes long, each song is packed with so many ideas and cool samples, and just there's times this album is straight up beautiful. But I'll get to that. I would like to hear what you all have to say.
So, yeah, I don't agree with any of that. I don't think it's so. I don't ever find it to be beautiful. I think the best thing it has going for it is the production. The beats stand out more than anything because with Memphis, and I'm not discrediting the rap, but it's gangster rap. There's some you parse through it lyrically. It's serious. It's dark shit. It's all on the surface. You know what I mean? It's not crazy poetic or anything like that. I'm not trying to discredit the music by saying that. So the thing about the NOD record, and I don't want to compare them too much because they're very different. Not only were the beats really hypnotic and memorable, and the catchy hooks were there as well, on top of good rapping and good chemistry. It wasn't a one-trick pony. It had a lot going for it. Across the very short runtime, there was a lot of ambition shown. And I don't think that's true here of anything but the beats, to be honest. I think the beats are cool, but I don't really find very many of them to be all that mesmerizing. In fact, I find a lot of them get tedious as the track goes on because they have, it loops so much by the end that any cool factor for the beat is totally killed by the end of the track for me, and I'm bored of it by the time it's done. Now, that's not true of every song here. I think the back half of this thing has 2 fucking great songs on it with I Shot a Man and 211s and 187s. I fucking love those songs. I think they're awesome rap songs. The North Memphis. Can't say the last part. But North Memphis is the 5th track and ends with a word that I can't say.
North Memphis guy.
Let's call it North Memphis gentleman.
North Memphis neighbor. and it's it's too close. Okay, so anyway, look, North Memphis,
When you
Gentlemen.
make a huge deal out of it, it's so much worse.
North Memphis, 5th track. If
God,
you look at the album, you see
cringing
it.
is
Chaz,
bullshit.
cut this. But the 5th track, North Memphis, I like that song a lot. The beat on there is like Big Bowser's Castle vibes at the beginning. It's very like dark, sinister, synthy. I'm not trying to take the piss out of it by saying that. I think that's actually cool.
Oh, I agree.
Well,
I adore that song. That's
I think the
song
production on
is
that song,
beautiful.
I think that one has the best beat. Like that's
The
personally.
flute
No, no.
sample,
Yes, yeah, the little like.
gorgeous.
I Shot a
Awesome.
Man has the best beat by far. I Shot a Man has the best beat.
I like that one too.
Let's talk about North Memphis here before we move on. Let me just say that is such an ethereal, beautiful, fantastic song. That is one. That's like top 5 minutes. Like I have heard. I mean, you all have heard one Memphis rap album, right? I've heard more. You know, I'm gonna flex right now and say that I have a relatively okay Memphis rap knowledge because I've been getting into it lately. That's a top 5 in the genre song for me personally. I can't get enough of that song. It's hypnotic. It's entrancing. I love the refrain on that track. It embodies the feeling of community that Memphis rap in general kind of brings.
Mhm.
It's just kind of a celebration of the scene and where they're from, and it's paired with just this beautiful. Like it's not like pretty, but it's kind of awe-inspiring to me.
You
The
talking about
sample,
the
the
flute
work.
is pretty. I mean, it is. It's straight up pretty.
I'm just saying like the song in general, it's just kind of it's more amazing than it is like pretty.
Honestly,
Is what I'm trying to say.
the beat captured me in a way on that song. A more recent one we listened to was the beat on the Main Draw McNichols record, Detroit River Rock, I think is the song. That it reminds me of that beat and how it's that awesome. So I mean, yeah, that's the best beat on the album. Chaz, like you were saying about I Shot a Man. I actually wrote here in my notes, I Shot a Management, which is fucking hilarious. I didn't realize I did that. Rasta T, great aggressive like patois. Like his fucking voice is so sinister and angry. Like it's a great song. Just as like a straight up rap song is awesome. It's not the most interesting beat, but it's just so aggressive compared to everything else that it stands out. 211 and 187, awesome song.
Fantastic.
It's amazing hook on the song. Love all the female rappers on here. But outside of that, and the really strange and kind of horrifying skit, which is the sound design on that is so blown out. You know what I mean? It kind of feels like on accident it's that way, but it helps the vibe.
I've never heard a man breathe so much on a fucking song.
He means running for his life.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny.
He just breathes so much.
Like the shots of noise are genuinely like noise music. You know what I mean? Like the gunshot going up is so loud and blown out. Outside of the songs I've talked about, the North Memphis, Shot a Man, 211s, I don't really like the rest all that much. Thinking of a drive-by, shout out Whites at the beginning of that song, the good whites, but don't rob the black folk. I like that little excerpt. I got a kick out of. I just thought it was kind of funny. But other than that, there's like some high-pitched kind of stabby keys. You know what I'm talking about in the back, like kind of less stabby, more plinky.
I mean, it's like a lot of the stuff in this time and from this scene, horror movie soundtrack inspired. When it comes to the sense,
like around "Give Me Some Red Rum" to "Thinking of a Drive-By," the beats are cool, but I'm really struggling to remember anything else about the record. And to me, that just doesn't I don't know, it doesn't really cut it because I really like some of the songs on the back half. I mean, I know out of everyone here, I am easily the most drawn to like the vocalist or the personality. I don't need that necessarily, but I think this one just lacks so much memorability outside of some really cool beat ideas that I wasn't really getting a whole lot out of it. Like, even though it's a really short runtime, I find myself until I get to the back half of this thing a little bored relatively.
I love how I started shaking my head and then I looked up and I saw Chaz also shaking his head.
I still like it. I just think it's
I know, but also fuck you.
That's fair. So you all go ahead Yeah, that's my spiel. I'm done. I don't want to say anymore because that's kind of everything.
Big bitch, Brian. Time to put you down. I don't love this thing, but I really, really like it. I think it's silly not to compare it to NOD because they're all in the same genre. So we have to compare music from the same genre to see, you know, the cream of the crop of the genre. So to get my spiel out of the way, I've grown a lot on NOD, and it was purely because of that Tom Ski Mask interview. But I've already mentioned that. Comparing Big Hill to NOD.
Really, before you get super into this, I'm very interested to hear how your opinions have changed about NOD and how that might have affected your opinions on Big Hill.
Well, I've re-listened to NOD since the interview, and that's what I'm about a decent 7 now, I think, with that one, where I really like it.
Yeah,
I was fascinated with the mythos, and hearing Tom Ski Mask talk about it just really elevated it. It made me appreciate more what they had to work with and what they did with it. I mean, and that's just the whole draw and interest of the genre itself. Because I've listened to a few Memphis rap on my own since then, and I mean this in the best of way, it all sounds kind of similar because they were all probably using the similar equipment and had similar situations of recording the songs. I mean, as Tom said in the interview,
what other records have you listened to? What other tapes?
Well, he makes an appearance on this, but I've listened to Lil Yo's mixtape that I might bring to the show. For those who don't know, that's Yo Gotti himself down in the DMs. But anyway, I've listened to this one, like the Trauma Center Killers came out in like the 90s.
Trauma Center Killers?
Trauma Center Killers. It has another cursed, beautiful album cover. Energy.
I've heard of that, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot longer than your typical Memphis rap. It's like 55 minutes. But yeah, it made me appreciate more of what the genre is known for. So listening back to the NOD record, again, the lyrics I still think are the most disappointing, and I'll get to that with Big Hill. It's just typical Memphis rap. Like Brian said, it's nothing poetic. But like I said, I'll get to that in a minute. But talking about NOD...
I will say, just to counter that, my last thing I'll add, North Memphis sort of subverts that. Not, you know, like I said, I don't personally, like the gangster rap stuff, I don't mind it as much as you, Chaz, but North Memphis definitely does subvert that with the community themes.
Mm-hmm. But I guess what I should say when it comes to gangster rap, I just think some do it better than others. I mean, Wu-Tang, tons of gangster rap on it. I just think they have diversity in some of the song topics that just make it more interesting. It's not the same thing over and over. With a lot of Memphis rap, I feel like it is kind of the same thing over and over. Just, we're awesome. This is our block. We're gonna shoot you if you talk shit. You know, that's just what it's all about, you know. So NOD... the beats really stood out to me more. I thought they were really repetitive, but no, they kind of endeared themselves to me. I think just the looseness of the rapping it just grew on me. It really grew on me. And it was all because
because when we've talked about Memphis rap in comparison to other rap that was coming out in the 90s, like you try to compare this genre to boom bap or anything like what the Wu-Tang Clan was doing at this time, completely different appeals. Like,
but the aesthetic, I knew from the get-go that I was in love with the aesthetic. And I could tell I know why you're getting so much into it, June, because it's like, it's the rap version of 80s underground indie. I mean, it's literally that. That is what Memphis rap is. And I can see why you're getting so much into it, because it's so lo-fi, it's so dirty, it's so loose. So talking about Big Hill, better album. Better all the way. Better flows, better cadences, better production, better beats, I think. But not as much character. I think NOD beats Big Hill so much because you got so much people on one album and just so much character. Like, I don't really get that on Big Hill. I think it's a better album, but you know, if I had to pick which group I like more, it would be kind of hard to choose. But if we're just talking about the album itself, I think Big Hill's Management is just a better album. All across the board, everything that I did have issues with NOD is rectified here. I think everything across the board is just better. I fell in love with the beats immediately. I think they're so eerie, so video gamey, which is what it's part of the Memphis scene. Yeah, we'll shoot you. You know, I'm gonna kill. Pull a trigger. You know. It's
of course,
just, yeah.
But that's part of the aesthetic. You have to
Yeah.
realize that they're taking these artistic liberties and and the whole point is trying to be frightening.
But this Big Hill doesn't really have any horrorcore
Some artists
elements.
have done it.
It's way more gangster
Some
rap.
artists have done it. It does have horrorcore elements because of all the synths, like horrorcore being a synth-led genre.
To me, horrorcore is the music, but it's more of the lyrics. I think when like horrorcore is about like talking about murdering people in an entertaining way. I mean, that's horrorcore to me. From the horrorcore I've listened to.
Well, you can take it to that level. That's a different strain of it. This is kind of the, this is sonically, this is horrorcore, which and the name comes from the horror soundtrack inspiration, right? Like, but what you're saying is definitely a strain. That's just more ICP's bag, more like,
I think the synths and stuff, the beats here are just Memphis rap. I wouldn't call these horrorcore beats. I would call these Memphis rap beats. That's just from what I've been hearing.
Well, Memphis rap and horrorcore are synonymous.
That's true.
I think that they're not necessarily synonymous, but there's a lot of similarities. The synths being like, there are genres that grew together.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, sometimes the only difference between a Memphis rap release and a horrorcore release is that the horrorcore release was made somewhere other than Memphis.
Okay.
Sometimes that's the only difference.
So,
there's scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
So Big Hill Management. I mean, yeah, it's great. I don't love it. I'm not mind blown. I've yet to hear Memphis rap that's like blown me away. I'm waiting for that. I mean, it's hard not to get, I can see where you're coming from, June, where the more you listen to it, the more you're just like into it. I love the beats hit immediately for me. And I Shot a Man is easily the best one in my opinion. That just 2-note, like 4-note, ba, 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 like in the beginning is so killer, so simple yet just so, and that's what I love about this type of music is that it's so simple yet really is effective. It taking a little and making it a lot. I don't think any of the beats are like beautiful though. I think you're going a little too heavy there, June.
North Memphis is awe-inspiring. The more I listen to it, the better it gets. Honestly, I think it's a phenomenal song.
I think the hooks here are stronger too. I mean, NOD, I Ain't Scared to Die will never be topped. But I mean, like, me. I like do a robbery. I like that. That's kind of cool. The one track Brian mentioned with the numbers, 211's
dude, not a better hook than 211, 187, 211. Oh, dude, amazing hook.
Yeah, the hooks on this are pretty strong too. I really dig them.
What do you think of the closer, Chaz? I just want to get that real quick.
I really liked it. I think it's super consistent. I don't have any weak tracks. I like every single one about the same. Just some beats are like a little better than others, I think, but all across the board, it's awesome. I'd give it a strong 7. I really enjoyed it.
Management for me, like you said, Chaz, I think is more about the production and the aesthetic than a mind-blowing or super character-driven experience. NOD kind of has both for me. That's why I personally prefer that record. This record doesn't really have a no fear. This doesn't have like a no fear. It doesn't have a Fugitives, which is still an absolutely incredible song. But it does have North Memphis, which is one of the most incredible displays of production talent in the entire genre. And that's not the only good song here. 211s and 187s, I Shot a Man, Give Me Some Red From, and everything else on this record too, because it's just a short, sweet tape that works incredibly well. I'm about to sneeze.
Sneeze away.
Do it. Get it in.
Bless you.
Here it comes.
Like you said, it's not like the entire thing is like edge of your seat or anything, but that's not really the point of most Memphis rap. I think it's about the vibe, it's about the aesthetic. And I realize in saying that there's genres or artists that I'm not that into because I feel the biggest draw is the vibe or the aesthetic. So there's got to be something more. pulling me in this direction. And for me, I think it's the detail in the production. Like you said, they're taking a little and they're turning it into a lot, but every listen, and I've heard this probably close to 8 to 9 times at this point, here's another little guitar bit, another little synth line. They're just so well made. So the appeal goes beyond just aesthetic, and it turns into just enjoying the music for how it's been put together, how it's been constructed, how everything sounds so wonderfully realized. I wouldn't rank this as a mind-blowing record or anything, but for me, it's just a must-listen for the genre.
To add on to that, I think that's why I'm starting to really understand the genre, because there's something about NOD, even in my initial review of it, that kind of hooked me. When I first heard the first track, I was like, oh, like I immediately, like something was like, okay, like I kind of get it, you know, but now hearing a little bit on my own and hearing this, I mean, I can see why it's quickly becoming like a really loved genre by a lot of people, and more tapes are getting dug up and getting elevated. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff here.
I'd give this album probably like a decent 8.
I guess I just thought it was more admirable than it was realized. That's kind of my take. I would go with like a light to decent 6. I think it's cool. I wasn't all that captured by it.
Damn. Light? God damn. So I'm going to start this off. Tiny Tim. To give some context, I've been really getting into outsider music lately. And this is just the first of many artists in that bubble that I wanted to bring to the show. I figured he was the best one to start with because he's the most well-known, most famous, not the most mainstream, most like anybody could get into this compared to some of the other ones that I've been listening to. There's this great video I saw that like kind of just introduced a few different artists in that
oh, that's our guy Alpha Media, right? Alpha Music Guide.
Great video.
I haven't seen that video, but actually he's a pretty good music content creator, so it's probably legit. He's got some pretty good stuff.
So Tiny Tim,
I realized just how much of a music nerd I am when you said like the king of outsider music, and my first thought was, oh, are we doing a Jandek album?
Me and Chaz don't even know what that is.
I wouldn't call Tiny Tim the king of outsider music, but just one of the most well-known figures in terms of like notoriety or fame that they received. Because Tiny Tim's weird, and a lot of music and outsider music is very weird. But Tiny Tim, most well-known for his Tiptoe to the Tulips. We've all heard it, whether you saw it in Insidious or just know the song. His falsetto voice and ukulele, it's a very well-known image. I think he's awesome. I really like the guy. We talked in the Discord that he may be problematic. June read this post-punk book that was like, said he was kind of a bad person.
Problematic.
I'm taking that with a grain of salt because I can't find any other information that isn't like he's well loved, he's well remembered. There hasn't any big like thing that's come out saying
these are firsthand accounts though from like people in the music scene, right? From that post-punk book you have, right? It's like a history of post-punk. That's where I thought it was coming from, right? Firsthand accounts of people who'd interacted with him in certain music scenes.
Mm-hmm. But there isn't like so some of it could be true, but I'm just gonna
they didn't prosecute him or some shit, but like, you know, I like there are dealings.
Yeah.
And also he is I mean
he's super religious.
Looking at the he married a 17-year-old. Okay, we're gonna probably cut most of this out. He married a 17-year-old when he was in his 30s. The 17-year-old he married a 17-year-old when he was in his 30s.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then he married someone who was a fan of his music since she was 12.
If you look at his pattern of behavior outside of his personal life in the music scene, I mean, he was very clearly desperate to hold on to his fame. Like, he clung to what little fame this album brought him until the day that he died. He is strange. I'm not disagreeing with you there. I guess the best way to put it is there is a lot to unpack with Tiny Tim.
Yeah.
Because there's the personal dealings, and then there's the very strange, like, you know, clearly desperate to be famous. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. So all that aside, you know, I did his debut album, God Bless Tiny Tim. So my personal thoughts on Tiny Tim is that I think he's a really interesting dude. And there's a lot of history there, as a lot of well-known, people in the outsider music scene. So much history, so much to unpack. It's part of the territory, part of the fun of digging through that music. God Bless Tiny Tim debut came out in 1968. Essentially a covers album. Covers of standards.
Yeah, that kind of
very well known
into his that feeds into his like pop archivist nature, right? The dude loved archiving music from famous pop songs, right? And this is from he was born in the 30s, so these are pop songs I've never heard of. I wasn't even aware these were standards until June brought it up. These songs are old as hell. These songs are almost a century old at this point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the material he's covering,
but just even going into that, I mean, he really, really just takes these songs for his own, I think. I mean, because Tiptoe Through the Tulips, before I did some research, didn't even know that was a standard. I just thought that was an original Tiny Tim song. Because that is like the version everybody knows. He's taken that for himself at this point.
His cover of it is become like a novelty song. Like it's most well known for him playing it,
Yeah. Quick thoughts before I give it up to Brian, and later I'll give my big look on this. I love this thing to death. Absolutely love it. It's a little Chazcore. Silly character, very grand poppy, stuff. I think the songwriting is fantastic, but these are standards, obviously. But I just think his covers of them are just so damn good, and he just really brings them into a new light. His own version of them. There's a lot to really enjoy here. It's not just like a couple of hits here or there. I think it's across the board pretty fantastic. And you wouldn't expect that, with what he's known for and the most well-known song on here. I think the most well-known song in here isn't even the best song on here. That's how good it is. I think, anyway. But like I said, Tiny Tim's such a crazy character. A lot to unpack, but we're just talking about his debut album here. What did you guys think?
Find this to be basically just okay. I didn't really hate this. I don't really hate Tiny Tim's vocals. I just kind of hear them and think, that's it then? I didn't find there to be a lot to dig into or unpack or really enjoy about this record. The weirder moments were the moments I enjoyed the most.
Of course
honestly,
they were.
The Viper is probably one of my favorites because they show there's character there beyond I'm a man with a falsetto. There is a lot of moments on this record that amount to that.
Nah, bad take.
I know it is. It's true. There's a lot of jokes or moments where the whole point really is I'm a man with a falsetto, rather than coming up with another creative or interesting idea. The Viper had that, even though it's weird. It's the way that he narrates. Couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. The way he says feet, that there's more to that than just a falsetto. And when it comes to the songs, they're mostly pop standards. Some of them are really good. Most of them are fine. It really depends on who's performing. And I don't think that Tiny Tim really elevates these songs, nor does the production, which is very, very standard, especially for its time. So one song here, one of the songs that I recognized was Fill Your Heart, and I couldn't stop comparing it to the David Bowie version from a couple years later, which I think is just so much better. And I know that's not really fair.
It's not.
But
oh my
it's
God.
pretty true. And the production and arrangements and the style of this record, when you don't take into account, that Tiny Tim has a unique voice, is all very, very standard, especially by 1968. It is. You're shaking your head, but what about this is so unique musically?
Well, it's hard to say it's unique because they're standards. So, but I just think his performance and the performances are just so fucking good. I don't know. I just loved. I had a big smile on my face through every song on here, and they're all super catchy. Again, I'm despite my score, I'm holding it back a little bit because this is essentially a covers album. Brian made a really good point of I've criticized groups or artists, most notably John Prine and Bob Dylan, for having covers in their albums. That criticism mostly came for all the songs are original. Why are we closing with covers? It feels, and again, just lazy, and I'm putting that in quotation marks. You could have just written a closer, And obviously, in this case, the whole novelty, yes, is that, hey, I'm weird and I've got a weird voice. I think that's not fair to Tiny Tim as a performer and a musician. And I think that's always been the stigma against him, that, oh, it's a novelty. I think he's a wonderful vocalist. I love songs like On the Old Front Porch where he's singing in different registers and it completely sounds like a different guy. Like, I thought it was 3 different vocalists on I didn't know. I knew he did the low and high voice for the guy and girl. I didn't know he did the voice for the father as well. It sounds like a completely different dude. I mean, that's not easy to do. So, I mean, there's some definite musicianship here that I think is pretty commendable. And I mean, he I don't know, I just get so hyped in some of these songs when he's singing. And the closer, This All I Ask, when he hits that high note, let the music play. It's kind of tear jerking. I'm like, yes. I was like, yes, Tiny Tim, let the music play. I don't know. I disagree 100% with that take. I don't think that's fact at all. That's definitely an opinion. I think that there is a lot to commend here, despite it being essentially a covers album. Because if you had not told me that, I would have assumed all these were originals, all written by him. But they're not. But I mean, I really think he just takes it on his own. I don't know. I really think so. But continue what you were talking about. That's my rebuttal for you, June.
Fair rebuttal. I think your enjoyment of this record comes down to how much you enjoy Tiny Tim, like, as a performer. For me, I enjoy him sometimes, and sometimes I just kind of roll my eyes. Some of the songs that I do that are some of the most well-known songs on this record, like Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Really? Wow!
Which I'm not that much a fan of, really.
That's crazy. Why?
I just don't understand the appeal, I guess. It's just a ukulele and a guy with a falsetto.
I think
and
the
I just
appeal...
don't get that much energy or much personality. Like, there's obviously personality in that performance. You can't say there's not personality in that performance, just the way that he phrases things. Do I find that personality compelling? Not particularly. What do you think, Brian?
It's okay. I mean, I think to say that he's just a dude with a falsetto is true on some tracks, but not true on others. I think on others, he actually comes through with performances that are eccentric enough to kind of validate his existence in the music sphere. But then other times it is just, he's relying on his voice so much that he's not really lending any credence or uniqueness to the tune that he's picking to cover. When he's failing to make the track unique, he's not really informing anything about his music other than, I like this really old pop music. When Bob Dylan or John Prine is covering an old song, it's giving you a direct pipeline into the influences that led them to be great songwriters. But Tim has written no songs. So what is, what I mean? What's the purpose of covering all these songs is that he just loves them. That's not bad on its face. Because, it's not bad on its face, but just looking at the rest of his career, it's like a huge it's like looking into a crystal ball at what was going to happen. Because clearly the dude has nothing going for him other than he loves pop music and can sing. But you only get so far on covers. And his lack of unique qualities outside of his voice stunts this album from being anything better than just pretty cool, has some great highlights. I want to talk about those highlights real quick. And of course, that's Tiptoe Through the Tulips. This is basically a Tiny Tim track at this point in history. It's all it's known for. No one knows that song outside of his performance of it. In his performance, it's iconic in a way. And it's also just turned it into a novelty song. The same thing for Living in the Sunlight, Loving in the Moonlight. Both of which I think are really good songs and a great start to the album musically. And he kind of does have like this very strange character about him when he's doing the intro, but I don't know. The more I listen to it, the more I just think he was like showing off his voice a little bit because that's his most notable quality. Then we get on the old
intro,
front.
actually.
I
like just wanted to mention, like, I like the intro and the outro and the whole theme of like, welcome to my show, I'm going to perform for you. Because that to me was the engaging character that I liked from Tiny Tim. I really liked I liked the first track, Welcome to My Dream, where he's like, you know, like, welcome to my dream. Like, it's weird and it's strange. You get the same thing from the Viper, which is silly, but also kind of weird. The last track, I liked some of his personality. It just wasn't fully formed enough. Like, if he took these songs and moved even further into this surreal, dreamlike aesthetic, I might have liked this a lot more, honestly. But to me, was the most compelling thing about this.
But I think it becomes clear that he's really not all that strange. He just maybe he just happened to like these performances of these bits. You know, maybe they're just accidentally strange, because honestly, the rest of the album, that's really not anything that comes up. Like, On the Old Front Porch is just a so-so duet with himself, I guess. I didn't realize he was doing the vocals on the rest of, like, the whole thing. That's kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, he does all three vocals.
Because it does sound so different. I just assumed it was someone else.
I know.
So, I mean, it's cool. Like, I don't love it, but it's cool. Like, I won't deny that that's kind of cool that I thought it was just a different person. But the song just doesn't do much for me, you know, whatever. Strawberry Tea is awesome. I think that is a fucking gorgeous track.
Yes.
But Tim singing on it is good. But honestly, this is one point on the album where, like, I just thought the playing was really good. It's 60s shit, not to, like, you know, make all that stuff sound like it sounds the same, but it sounds like 60s shit, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? It sounds like a 60s pop production. I love the strings, though. I do think it is gorgeous. The Other Side is another really boring moment, I think, and is really long. Ever Since You Love Me I'm a Nut is okay. And you see the problem I'm running into? It's just okay. Like, there's nothing memorable about these tracks outside of, like, I feel like I'm listening to just a so-so 60s album on these tracks, and these are standards, you know, so it's not even like there's potential in these songs. There's someone else's songs, and they were recorded in the 60s. Like, that's a lot of the tracks on here.
They're competently arranged, but they're not much more than that,
right,
for the most part.
The Coming Home Party is awesome. Awesome track. Love the explosive drums on that track. I don't know. That is like the only a stroke of genius on that. I just think it sounds so fucking killer. I love the explosive drums around Tim's performance, but the songwriting is killer for a song from the 30s. So, like, I don't know what variations are put on this, but I'm pretty sure they had drums. So, like, you know, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I think the song is awesome. The tune at the core of the song is awesome. The performance is good. Tim, whatever. And you could put, you know, anyone doing the vocals of the song, someone that can sing, and they got it. But I do think the song is awesome. I don't want to discredit it too much. The problems for the record are compounding in a lot of it's kind of boring song wise, like performance wise. It's just filled with highlights. I don't really like any of the closing three tracks at all. I think it just totally peters out at the end. I think there's some decent vocal performances on the back end, but otherwise it's nothing to note, honestly. It's just now first listen, I was a little blown away. I was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. But once you kind of get the context for what's going on for the record, you understand that while it's cool, it's not really remarkable. And the thing is, it's almost like a novelty album, because the best songs on it are kind of the novelty songs at the beginning. You know what I mean? Because his takes on them are just so iconic. But after that, I think it is just so lacking in qualities that give it any staying power or enjoyability. Like, I know that sounds super fucking mean, but it grew off with every single listen, because the paint, you know, the paint starts chipping. Like, this is a beater van that was made to look cool. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Y'all are big, big, big dum-dums.
I agree for the most part with what Brian said, and he probably actually likes this album more than I do, but I would recommend it because a lot of people get a lot out of it, and if you really enjoy his vocals and performance, you'll probably get a lot out of this album because it's right up front. It's the most noticeable thing about pretty much any track here. For me personally, I'm not that much of a fan of his vocals, so it just kind of limits my enjoyment of this album at a certain level. But if you like his vocals, like if you're into the whole personality like Chaz is, you're pretty much probably going to end up liking this album because it's not like the quality of songs differs all that much, in my opinion.
That's kind of
Brian had some, highlights and lowlights, but for me, it's fairly similar throughout.
Yep, I go with a decent 6. It's cool. I would recommend it actually. I think it's worth hearing because
fucking shit.
I'm going with a strong 5.
The death sentence, the strong 5. You hate to see it.
9, baby. Y'all are so stupid sometimes. Y'all really fucking piss me off sometimes because y'all don't get it. Y'all
man, we're right.
Don't get it. Y'all just don't fucking get it.
Chaz, it's tough being wrong, buddy. It's tough being wrong. I get it.
Next time we're doing another regular episode because early on in the season we really like to just open it up to whatever the hell we want to talk about. My pick is something that I kind of feel like I should have chosen in the winter. It's starting to get a little warmer outside.
Kind of like a Christmas album type of pick, right?
Not a Christmas album. Fuck you.
That's fucking awesome.
It's Mariah Carey's 1994 classic. Yeah, All I Want for Christmas is
It's a cold album. It's an album for
cold.
It's very much a winter album.
Are its nipples hard though?
There is a level of optimism to it. What did you just say? I
don't know. We're just giving you a lot of shit. Just say it. Just take it. Just muscle through it.
Are its nipples hard though? That's what I asked.
Like in winter, like when it's the winter.
It's an album that I consider a winter album, but it has a level of optimism about it that makes it maybe fit for spring as well. And actually, come to think about it, the first time I got into this record, it was in the middle of the summer. So what do I know? We're going to go with the Sophistopop classic.
Oh, it's the blue one, isn't it?
Hat by the Blue Nile.
Yeah, I've known about this one for a while. I haven't heard this shit. Chaz, you got to pick yours because I'm basing my pick off of what you picked.
So last season, I was like,
can't do Weezer, Chaz. We've done Weezer. You can't pick them again. It's not even a sequel. Stop picking Weezer every week and then cutting it. It's fucked up. He cuts it out. Every week he picks Weezer or some random album, and we have to tell him it's not a sequel. You've already picked Weezer. It happens literally every time, and then he cuts it. And he can't prove otherwise unless he cuts this.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We need more metal on this show. Got a few specific subgenres of metal that I'm going to sprinkle throughout. I think we're going to do some glam metal. Twisted Sister.
Oh, yes.
This is this is another Greg Core pick. It's a band that I got into through my dad. He played I Wanna Rock and We're Not Gonna Take It From Me. Growing up, love this shit. But I think compared to all the other glam metal that's like, canon, blows it out of the fucking water.
We're gonna do one that I heard all the way back when it came out, I think, and I didn't think much of it at the time. And the reason we're doing this one first is because I feel like it's grown so much since I heard it, because the follow-up kind of made the vision of the first one clearer. But we need to start where it began because the discography right now is, really short and it's worth going in order. And it's difficult. It's a very difficult album. Maybe the most difficult that we'll have to talk about. But I'm at a point now where I think I can discuss it and maybe guide the discussion a little bit as we're kind of dealing with the horrible things that are on this album while still trying to talk about it musically. I think we're pretty good in general about how we cover things and how we get, not dance around, but work with darker topics on the show. But without any more stalling, it's going to be Lingua Ignota's 2017 debut album, All Bitches Die.
I've been really hyped to do the other one, Caligula. I've been really hyped.
We'll do. I mean, we're gonna do both. You can't do All Bitches Die without doing Caligula. I mean, we will hit Caligula up this season, but we got to start with All Bitches because I feel like when I listened to Caligula, this one became so much clearer, like what was going on.
Okay.
Like I clicked so much easier.
Okay, this is an artist I've been really excited to do. I knew you were gonna pick this girl at some point, Brian. I knew you were gonna pick her at some point, so I've been waiting for it.
This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I'm Brian Courtney. I was joined by Chaz Jenkins.
Tiptoe through the tulips by the window. That is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
Oh. Right, that's pretty good.
Awesome.
No, don't do that part. And June Lindbergh.
I'm sorry, I was just looking at a Twitter page that.
Yep, that's great. Professional. That's why I'm doing the outro. No, shut the fuck up. You don't get to talk. And we're out.